Well, welcome back to QX Church. This is Pastor Scott Conway, and we are continuing our series on grieving. So this is lesson number 3. In 1 and 2, we talked about other people grieving and helping other people through their grief. And today we're talking about going through it. So we were talking about being there for people in the last 2 messages. This time we're talking about when you're going through grief. Now, a couple of things about grief. One of them is that, obviously, when someone you love dies, there'll be a period of grieving. Something people sometimes overlook is when there's the end of a relationship, very often, there'll be grieving. When there's any significant loss, there will be grieving. And sometimes people forget that they need to give themselves permission to grieve no matter what the loss is. That I remember when I lost a business, and the feeling I had the very last time I put my key in the door and I locked the door, and I knew that this time when I lock this door and I walk away, that this is no longer my business. It's gone. It's dead. And it surprised me. I didn't think I would be grieving the loss of a business. It's just a business. It's not like a person. But I found myself grieving the loss of the business. I've been through divorce, and I remember filing for divorce. I remember taking off my wedding band and realizing when I was taking it off that this is the very, very last time I'm taking this ring off as a married man. But I'm not just taking it off because I'm working out. I'm not taking it off because I'm cleaning something. I'm taking it off because this is no longer a wedding ring. It no longer represents this marriage. And there was a season of grieving from that. And that kind of surprised me. Sometimes people grieve the loss of a deal. Sometimes people grieve the loss of a relationship. Sometimes people even grieve an empty nest. Well, that's been the goal the whole time. Your whole goal is to get the kids grown up and get them out of the house. And yet somehow when it happens, there's a loss. And when there's a loss, there's a season of grieving. And because there's a season of grieving, you have to have some understanding of what you're going through and be ready and willing and able to go through it. Now, in this message, you may notice a lack of theology. And there's a good reason there's going to be a lack of theology. Because it's about grief. It's not about theology. In moments of grief, your theology is either settled or it isn't. You either already have your theology settled, you already have your spiritual issues settled, you already have your philosophy, you already have your values, or you don't. Grief may not be a good time to grapple with these things. When emotions are high, that's probably not the best time to try to sort out your belief in cosmic principles. Because when emotions are high, intellect is low. I was dealing with one gentleman, and he was having some challenges because of his daughter. And one of the first questions he asked in this trying time for him was, is this God's punishment for the things I did in my youth? In his theology, in that time of crisis, that's where his theology was, is he believed God was a vengeful God and that God was going to visit pain upon his daughter for his sins in his youth. And that this was going to be a repercussion imposed upon him. Now, do you have any idea how hard it is to talk someone out of theology when the theological viewpoint they have is explanatory to them in a time of intense emotion? That is really not the time to get into theology. That's the time to help people through their grief and settle those matters of theology separate. Settle your philosophy separate. Now, how many of us know we're going to have a time of grief? Hopefully, that'll be 100% of us. Because if you do not go through a time of grief, that means you will be someone else's source of grief very, very soon. Because stuff happens. So rule number 1 when it comes to grief is let yourself grieve. I don't even care if you think it's stupid to be in grief over this. Let yourself grieve. Rule number 1 with others, when they're grieving, is let them grieve. So it should be no surprise that rule number 1 for yourself is let yourself grieve. And it might be surprising to you, the things that you grieve. That there was a woman who was grieving the fact that she missed her baby's firsts. Because she put her child in daycare and off she went to work. And she knew intellectually, if you asked her in her head, if you are at work 40 hours a week, what is the probability you're going to miss your kid's first steps, your kid's first words? She could have told you in her head, well, of course. If I'm gone that much of my child's waking life, if I'm gone for a third, 2/3 of when my kid's awake, the probability I'm going to miss these things is really, really high. She knew that in her head. But when she got the news, it really hit her hard. And she didn't realize how much she had sort of absorbed during the course of her youth, her teen years, her babysitting years, her childcare years, the years with her nieces and her nephews. How important this would be to her and how much she would grieve missing it. Realizing this is my firstborn child. This is the first time I would ever have a child I gave birth to ever have a first. And I wasn't there. And she was completely blindsided by the fact that she had grief over this. That she was mourning a loss of something she didn't even know that she was expecting and craving to have. So whenever grief arises, let yourself grieve. Give yourself permission to feel however you feel. That's okay. In times of grief, a lot of times we have people talk about, oh, you're so strong. You don't have to be strong. It's okay to be weak. When I'm sitting down with a mother who lost her daughter, and she's talking about, I have to be strong, I have to be strong. And I'm watching her shake, and I'm looking at her eyes, and she's at a breaking point, trying to be strong. And I told her, you don't have to be strong. And as soon as I just uttered that one line, you saw the tears well up in her eyes. And I told her, it's okay to be weak. And you just saw her whole body buckle. Like someone who has been carrying this heavy weight, and they could just let it go. And I told her it's okay to cry. And suddenly she started sobbing. All these things that were right behind the surface, waiting to come out, but she was trying so hard to be so strong that she was going cold. You don't have to be strong. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. Let yourself grieve. Same as when you're helping other people. The way out is through. The way out of grief is to go through grief. Just as with someone else's grief, we need to know for ourselves that the way out is to go through it. The blue skies are on the other side of the storm. The light at the end of the tunnel is on the other side of the tunnel. If you refuse to go through the tunnel, you don't get to the light on the other side of the tunnel because the light's on the other side of the tunnel. And if you're hanging on to this side of the tunnel, trying to not go through it, if you're partway through the tunnel and you're scared of the dark and you huddle down in a corner, or you try to be strong and stoic and you stand your ground, you don't get through. The way out is through. The way out of grief is to walk through the darkness of the storm to come out the other side. In trying to avoid the storm, we get stuck in the storm. We get stuck in our grief. In trying to just skip the storm, we often get stuck in our grief. That there's legitimate things to be in pain about, and if we try to ignore it, we don't process it. There's legitimate things to be sad about, and if we don't allow ourselves to be sad about it, we don't process it. Or sometimes we get so fixated on the pain itself that we stay on the pain, and then we don't give ourselves permission to continue through the pain. If you just try to skip the pain, you get stuck in it because you're not processing it. If you try to avoid the pain, you're going to get stuck in it because you're not processing it. If you just let yourself go numb and stay numb, you're going to get stuck in it because you're not processing it. So if you just keep in mind, if the way out is through, and going through means you have to process these feelings, then you know anything that doesn't let you process the feelings means you're not going to process the feelings. That means they're still sitting there somewhere in your heart, somewhere in your soul, and it's just waiting to come up and bite you. And the worst thing that can happen to you is it metastasizes into something else in your beliefs, your values, your principles. It starts to show up in your relationships. It starts to show up in your work. And it starts to show up in your physical health. Grief needs to be reconciled to life. That means it needs to be processed. Grief needs to be reconciled to life. That means you need to walk it through and let your heart figure out where all this stuff fits in. It needs to be reconciled to life so we can learn to live with the new normal. Not move on, not ignore it, not be in denial, not be resisting it, not get over it, but learn to live with it. Figure out the kind of letting go that will serve you in a healthy way. A lot of times the stories I have connected to things like this are usually women, because it's women who are usually the ones that are willing to come sit down in my office and talk about things like this. And one particular woman, what she was grieving was the way she was mothered. And it's a fundamental reality that intellectually we all know is you can't be reparented. Even if your parents like, oh my gosh, I just realized everything I did wrong when you were a kid. If you could be 2 years old again, I could totally nail it this time, I promise. That even if you have a parents that have this massive spiritual awakening, you still can't go back and be reparented. My own mom says if I go back and be 2 years old, she knows what to do with me this time. But she also said that if my brother could go back and be 2 years old, she still has no idea what she would do with him. But she was just winging it with him. What made it so hard for her to wing it with him is the simple fact that she thought she knew what she was doing because she experimented on me, and then it turned out my brother was so not me. We get along well enough, but we're different enough that if you think you got it figured out because you raised a Scot, turning around and using that to raise a Mike just wasn't working. So she expected she knew what she was doing, and then she ended up winging it too. But this woman was sitting in my office, and what she was grieving was the mother she never had. She was grieving how bad her childhood was. And why she was grieving this in her 30s was because she had never really dealt with it. So here she is, 37 years old, clinically depressed, sitting in my office, grieving stuff that happened to her as a preteen. Stuff that would have, in a much more healthy way, been processed as a teenager. She might have made some healthier decisions as a teenager had she processed all of this earlier. She might have made much healthier decisions in her 20s had she processed this as a teenager. But here she is now in her 30s, processing her childhood, allowing herself to grieve the childhood she never had. So feel what you feel. Now this might seem to contradict some of what I just said, but feel what you feel even if it's nothing. Now that may sound odd, because I just got done saying, numbness is an issue. Avoiding it is an issue. Well, here's part of the thing. Whatever you feel is what you feel. That should be obvious, right? It is what it is. And that's okay. You might not feel anything. Because one of the stages of grief is denial. Now, when you are in denial, your intellectual self may know the reality. I mean, if you take someone who's in denial and you ask them intellectually, it's like, do you know blank? They can tell you very often in a cold, mechanical voice, yes, of course I know my father's dead. But what's going on is the emotions aren't ready to deal with it. The emotions aren't ready for it, and because the emotions aren't ready for it, sometimes you'll feel numb. It's the denial is your heart is going, I'm not ready for that yet. And it holds it back. Your brain's going, but it's true. This is something we must deal with. But the emotions are going, no, not yet, not yet. I'm not ready yet. And the heart will deny the reality or deny the totality of the reality because it doesn't want to face it yet. It's not ready for it yet. It can't take that much of a burden yet. It's the heart equivalent of you look at this giant mess and you have the pile of boulders and say, well, you need to move that pile. So, well, I can't carry that pile. Well, you don't have to move the whole pile all at once. What can you move right now? Well, I can take a little rock. Well, guess what happens if you take enough little rocks out of the pile? Eventually, you're done with the pile. And so, whatever you feel is okay, even if it's nothing. If your emotions are okay, I'm not ready for that pile at all. I can't even pick up a little rock. I'm just trying to even wrap my head around the fact there is a pile. And just give me a minute. And sometimes give me a minute is give me an hour. Give me a day. Give me a week. Now, at some point, you do have to confront the reality. Because if you're using denial as your coping mechanism, which means that's how you're going to deal with it in general, that will be unhealthy. But denial as a temporary filtering system to allow yourself to just let stuff bleed through a little bit at a time so you can process it a little bit at a time, that can be healthy. So if you're feeling temporarily numb, let yourself feel numb temporarily. Let yourself feel nothing temporarily. In fact, sometimes feeling nothing temporarily is the healthiest thing you can do. A friend of mine is an officer. Retired from the United States Army as a major. When he was stationed in Baghdad, and he was a captain, his best friend was his commanding officer. He was the major. And they're in the field. And he watched his best friend get killed by an IED right in front of him. All of a sudden, he's in charge. All of a sudden, these people in the field with him are under his command, looking to him to make the decisions to get them home alive. Does he have time to feel the loss of his best friend? Or is this something that needs to be put off for a little while? Sometimes when there's things that have to get done, and they have to get done now, there is no time to feel anything. That is going to have to wait. So it's okay to feel nothing. It doesn't mean that you're not in grief. It doesn't mean you're disrespecting the value of the person, that you're disregarding the importance of the loss. It just means something else has to be happening right now. One of the stages of grief being denial means that even if there's nothing else going on, you might find emotionally you're just really not dealing with it yet. But just know that you should deal with it at some point, hopefully soon. You might feel angry, and that's okay. Why? Is anger? It's part of grief. Depression is part of grief. That feeling of bargaining is part of grief. Whatever you feel, the feeling is okay. Now, keeping in mind, whenever you're dealing with any kind of grief, any kind of major life change, here's a key principle. Stand down for major decisions. Stand down for major decisions. If there's a way you can avoid making a major decision, avoid making the major decision. Now you're thinking, but I just got done talking about something. He's in command. He has to make decisions. Well, he's in command. He has to rely on his training. He's been trained in what to do. And he and his men will do what they've been trained to do. So you keep doing what you know you should do, but when you have to make a judgment call, you need to be aware that some judgment calls, if you make this judgment call in a time of intense emotion, you might make the wrong call. If you rely on your training, you might be okay. Getting back to a military example, some people made a decision to go against their training. And in going against their training, they made the decision that they were going to go get revenge. Well, that's not what they're trained to do. They didn't rely on their training. They made a call in a time of grief, in a time of anger, in a time of emotional intensity, and they made the wrong call. And people got hurt that shouldn't have been hurt. People got killed that weren't involved. Things like that are a problem. Now, fortunately, most of us don't live the kind of lives at the scale where life and death hangs in the balance. But it's a reminder to us that if we allow our emotional intensity to make the decisions for us, the probability we're going to make a really, really bad decision is much higher than it normally is. So while you are grieving, be careful. While you are in denial, be careful. While you're in bargaining, be careful. While you're depressed, be careful. Certainly, while you are angry, be very careful, because that's when you're likely to do things that's going to hurt other people. Now, we may know we're grieving when someone dies. We may have a different kind of grief. It could be over the loss of a relationship, the loss of a career, the loss of a business. We may be grieving the empty nest. We may be grieving the loss of an opportunity, the falling apart of a deal, and any number of things that could be triggering the emotion in us and triggering an emotional response. And that's when we need to be very careful about major decisions. That's why it might be a really, really good idea to bounce stuff off of a trusted advisor and lean on that advice. That might be really, really good to make your standard policy freeze. One more military analogy. Special operators. Now, we call them special forces sometimes in popular culture. Special forces is actually a specific unit name in the United States Army. So you get the actual term is special operators. But any kind of commando unit or team, if they're out on patrol, they're out on a mission, and something happens, they see something, they hear something, the first thing to do is stop. Just freeze. Look at it. What is it? Is this a threat? Do we have to do something about it? Freeze first. That's a good general policy. That when you're in grief, to whatever extent you can just put things in a holding pattern, that might be a good thing to do. Keep the pattern going. Because if this is the pattern you've been using and it's a good, healthy pattern, and you stick to that pattern, chances are high you'll be okay. Quitting things in times of emotional intensity, maybe not a good decision. Starting things in times of emotional intensity, also maybe not a good decision. Doing the things you decided before you had intense emotions that would be a good idea to be doing, probably a better idea. If in doubt, just freeze. Don't quit, freeze. Take a look at it. Get some input. Get some advice from people you trust. People who know what they're doing. People who can see it from over there. People who have a better vantage point. People who aren't in grief and can see it with clearer vision. Anytime a significant life change might leave us grieving, maybe for a little while, maybe for a long while, stand down from major decisions if you can. When men are grieving the loss of a marriage, you want to know the two most common mistakes they make? One of the most common mistakes they make is they jump in bed with any and every woman who will jump in their bed. The other most common mistake they make is they jump into the next relationship with the first woman who will have them for a relationship. And when you grab the first one that comes along, that's willing to have a relationship with you, and is willing to jump too far too fast, what is the probability that's going to be a good relationship decision? Higher or lower than when you build systematically over time? The risk is much lower. If you're in a financial crisis and you get that email, oh my gosh, this Nigerian person has all these tens of millions of dollars. This is a blessing from God. Perfect time. Good decision, bad decision. Terrible decision. I actually met a man and his business partner. They were trying to save a multi-million-dollar deal. They were trying to save a $50 million resort deal. And they were in panic mode, and they got one of these emails, and before someone caught them, the two of them that were in the emotional intensity had gotten so far along that the business partner was actually at the airport to fly to Nigeria. Good decision, bad decision. Fortunately, this thing had come up in conversation, and someone said, no, 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 no. Someone they trusted. And go, really? And once they get out of the emotion, they go, oh yeah, yeah, okay, I see that now. But in the middle of the intensity, it made perfect sense in the moment. You know, I'm thinking about how many things you did where afterwards you're going, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Think about how many times kids do stuff. And as the adult, you're watching, I don't get that. Well, to the kid, it makes perfect sense. Because they don't see all the other variables. When we get in emotionally intense times, any emotional intensity, and certainly in times of grief, things seem like a good idea. But it may only be a good idea because we're denying a reality. It may only be a good idea because we're angry about something. It may only seem like a good idea because we're engaging in some kind of a spiritual bargaining. Like, God, if only you'll give me this, I promise you I'll... And you're trying to make a trade with God. It's somewhat likely that significant pervasive emotion may influence a decision in ways that might not be best for you long term. You might make a good call. And sometimes, and this is hard for people to wrap their head around, sometimes in times of intense emotion, you will make a brilliant call. And then you remember that in the time of intense emotion, you made a brilliant call. And so you keep wanting to make calls in times of intense emotion, but that was your one brilliant call. Fred Smith from FedEx took all of his money to the casino, and he gambled his company money in order to win the money, to make payroll so that FedEx survived. And you go, oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. Well, what if every business person in the world used that plan? 9 times out of 10, they're going to get wiped out. And if Fred Smith goes, well, you know, that worked that time. Right now, we got a $1.2 billion. Give me the billions. I'll go gamble. We'll win. Because sometimes you got lucky, and getting lucky doesn't mean that should be your plan. That means you got lucky. If you really must make major decisions, remember, consult with trusted advisors. Not advisors that seem like they might have a good idea at the time. Advisors you trusted before the emotion hit. Advisors whose expertise you already knew you could rely on when you weren't having this emotional intensity. Because the exact same thing that makes you prone to bad decisions in times of emotional intensity also makes you prone to choosing poor advisors in times of emotional intensity. Has to be a trusted advisor whose advice you would have trusted when you weren't in this emotionally intense time. In general, it's best to put off major decisions if you can. Think through it if you must. Rely on training if you can. But as much as possible, get trusted help. Now, closely related to this is this idea. Stand down from lasting actions. It doesn't have to be a major decision, though. But if it's going to be difficult to undo, stand down from lasting actions. If I do A and it's going to create a chain that I can't undo, even if A seems like a small decision point, stand down from that. While the decision may not seem very big, if it is difficult to undo, it may be best to put it off. This can be as simple a thing as dropping out of school. Where someone may decide, you know, all this stuff going on, that's it, I'm dropping out. I have watched people drop out of school with literally 1 unit left to get their degree. Like 1 unit! That's like a weekend lab. Because I said, well, you know, but my mom's sick. And mom did eventually die 7 years later. I think mom would have preferred to die having watched her daughter graduate, personally. My father liked seeing me in my cap and gown. I had to go to the hospital to visit him in my cap and gown because he was in the hospital. He would much rather have seen me show up and visit him in the hospital in my cap and gown than have me just quit because he got sick. He had to quit because he got sick. There's no reason for me to quit because he got sick. He felt a tremendous sense of continuity knowing, well, I might not be able to, but my son is. But even as simple a thing as getting a tattoo. And I said, well, I've been thinking about it for a long time, but now might not be the best time to make that call. Wait until you've walked through the grief and then make the call. Now, might it be fine? Of course it might be fine. Certainly it's something you're going to live with because they're pretty permanent. But just put it off. Making a major purchase. You think, life's too short, I'm going to buy that car. And now you sign up for the 5-year loan because that's the only way you could afford it. And now you made a 5-year decision to get that sports car that you thought was cool. And then later on you're going, you know, that might not have been the best decision to make. Or taking on debt. Whatever it is. If once you walk into a choice, if it's going to be really difficult to untangle or impossible to untangle, just put it off for a while. Even if the decision doesn't seem too large. Now here's a technique. Maintain a chain of next actions. Maintain a chain of next actions. What do I need to do next? Now, in times of intense grief, in times of intense emotion, this is how we train our military to get through things. This is how we train our first responders to get through things. This is how we train people who we know we're going to drop them in intense situations. We train them to just keep asking this question, what do I need to do next? What has to happen next? And to keep going to the next thing, and then the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. Now, if you're trained well enough, or you have enough experience, you have this whole chain of next things. Where it doesn't matter how I feel, I know I have to do this next. It doesn't matter how scared I am, I know that this is the next thing. Doesn't matter how angry I am, this is the next thing. Doesn't matter how much despair I'm in, this is the next thing. If you feel your emotions are affecting you, just maintain an ongoing list of next actions. You might not be able to think about the whole big picture. That's okay. What do you need to do next? What is the next thing you have to do? And some people, I got to feed the kids. All right, let's feed the kids. Let's get the kids some food. Okay, now what do you need to do? Laundry. Laundry needs to be done. Okay, let's do laundry. What now? Lunch. Okay, let's do lunch. Oh, I'm running out of some stuff. Okay, so grocery shopping. And just take it in small bites. In small bits, small enough to manage intellectually. So emotion can be high, intellect can be low. But if the bite's small enough, low intellect is plenty for a next action. Just do the next piece. You don't have to see the whole staircase to step on that first step. We know that from giant goal setting. In times of grief, your giant goal setting might be 3 steps is a giant goal for you. Just go 1 step. That's okay. Next action, next action, next action. What's the next thing you need to do in your home? What's the next thing you need to do at work? What's the next thing you need to do for yourself? Sometimes people forget to ask that question, especially when you get in like mommy mode, daddy mode. You're taking care of other people. And you go, oh, shower, I need to shower. It didn't occur to me, I need to shower. And next thing for your family. Next thing for your car. And just look at each thing in your life and go, okay, what do I need to do next? What is the next thing? Oh, gas. I'm going to need gas in my car. And just take it one little bite at a time. Now here's a huge one. And there's a couple of key principles connected to this. Try to be aware. There's a whole bunch of try to be awares here. Try to be aware if you might be hurting others. Try to be aware if you might be hurting others. If you are in grief, if you are in pain, it is so easy for hurting people to hurt people and be oblivious of the damage you're doing. If you are in anger, it is so easy for angry people to take out their anger at people who have nothing to do with where this flood of rage is coming from, and to do damage, sometimes permanent, irreparable damage, because it's targeted at the wrong person. When you are depressed, might you be hurting others through neglect, by pushing them away, and then wondering why they went away? Again, dealing with a woman in my office who was grappling with the loss of a marriage. And it took a while to get to this, but to cut to the chase on this one, what had basically happened is she kept pushing her husband away, and her husband went away. And she was mad that her husband went away. But she kept pushing him away. And this kind of gets to be the catch-22 is, so she wanted someone who disrespected her words enough to ignore what she said and ignore what she asked for, to stay even though she said go, to be close even though she said get away, but wants to be respected when she wants to be respected, and wants her words adhered to when she wants her words adhered, but there's no way to tell from outside her brain which one's which. So sometimes he sticks around, he's in trouble. Sometimes he sticks around and it's exactly what she wanted. Sometimes he backs off, he's in trouble. Sometimes he backs off, it's exactly what she wanted. And there was no way to tell from outside. I'm not emotionally involved. I'm going, I have no clue what you want from one moment to the next. I really don't. It's like, and I'm just sitting in the office. You're the one telling me the story. So it's not even like I'm watching it and I'm confused. I'm listening to your own version of the facts and I'm still confused. I don't know how I would tell listening to you tell me the story. How the heck is someone who's there supposed to figure it out when he's emotionally involved? I don't get it. So try to be aware when you might be hurting other people. Now, doubly so if the other people around you are also grieving, because you're in pain and they're in pain. You might be in denial, they might be in anger. You might be in anger, they might be in bargaining. They might be in depression where they're particularly vulnerable right now to being hurt. And you're in anger, particularly vulnerable to hurting people. And when someone is depressed, when someone is already in darkness, teetering on an edge, and you're angry and you take it out on them, sometimes there's no coming back from some of these things. So try to be aware if you're hurting others. Try to be aware if in your denial you're doing damage. Try to be aware if in your bargaining, if you're beating people up. Try to be aware if in your anger you're doing damage to other people. That you're taking it out on them, at them, hurting someone else, going after someone else. Try to be aware if in your depression, if you're not pushing people away and telling them, don't even bother dealing with me, and then wondering why they're not around dealing with you. And even try to be aware if as you're moving into acceptance, and if you're getting there before other people are getting there, that even in your acceptance you don't end up hurting other people because you're coming to terms with it while they're still stuck in one of the other phases because you walked it through faster. My history shows that I can typically walk through even significant grief in about 2 weeks. And we're talking like at the level of my father died. Give me about 2 weeks. And there are certain parameters that I need in place to be able to process in about 2 weeks. But I can process that in about 2 weeks. That's an unusual pace. Then there's other things I've been through that because I didn't have all the pieces in place, could take me up to 2 years. So imagine I got this range of 2 weeks to 2 years. Well, what if the 2 weeks me is dealing with the 2 years me, and the 2 weeks me gets to acceptance in a couple of weeks, and I'm end up hurting the 2 years me because the 2 years me is still partly in denial because it's not emotionally prepared to deal with all of it, so some of it's filtering through, and a chunk of it is processed through to a little bit of bargaining, and a chunk of it is processed through as far as there's some anger, some resentment in there, and part of it is processed through to some low-grade sadness, and none of it's quite reached acceptance yet. Well, the acceptance part of me that's already done it could end up hurting the parts of me that's stuck somewhere in this process. So try to be aware if you might be hurting people. Try to be aware if in the process of grieving if you're hurting others, and in particular, be very, very careful about picking fights. Now this gets to be another one. Because people who are angry, people who are depressed, and even people who are bargaining, if part of your bargaining is with someone else and wanting to trade something about them for something with the kids, like this should have been you, not our kid, type bargaining. Be very careful about picking fights because you do not want to be fighting while you're grieving. Just think about this. You're already angry and depressed. You're already in pain. And you're going to pick a fight? Now, think about a physical analogy. So, well, I guess most of us here are martial arts instructors. So imagine somebody is already beat up. They've already got a black eye, a bloody nose, their arm is messed up, their shoulder's half out of its socket, they're limping, and they show up and they pick a fight with you. Is this going to go well for them? And what if they push it and they make it a fight? They're already beat up. What's a fight going to do to them? Now, what if they show up beat up, but you can't tell by looking at them they're beat up? All you can tell by looking at him is this guy's a bully. This guy's being mean. This guy's doing damage. He needs to be stopped. But what you don't know is that his shoulder's already dislocated, but you can't see it. That he's already torn ligaments in his arm, but you can't see it. He's picking this fight with you. And then what if both of you beat up and this other person's picking a fight with you? You know you're beat up because you're in grief. And this person just gave you a target for your anger. This person just gave you a target for all of that pain you've got inside. And you can unload it on this person because this person started it. And you might not even do it on purpose, but you could end up unloading on them. So you certainly don't want to be starting a fight when you're in pain. Because if the other person says, all right, you want to fight, you got to fight. You could get destroyed. Or anything between here and destroyed. When what you really want is some help. What you really want is some comfort. What you really need is some healing. And what you created was a fight. If you're in pain, you probably don't want to be in more pain. If you're picking a fight, you're starting a fight, and the person doesn't fight, now you're the bad guy. Because now you're beating up on people, that aren't fighting back. You created victims. Now you're being the bad guy. That doesn't usually make people feel better. Most people then go, yes, I was the villain in this one. That's awesome. I worry about you if that's the way you feel. And if you end up in a fight, well, now you're hurt even worse. You'll be more vulnerable and you'll be more likely to lash out more than you mean. The costs could be high. The cost could be high for you. The cost could be high for the other person. The cost could be high for the relationship. I've seen entire business partnerships that have gone on for years blow apart in 1 week. A multi-million-dollar partnership over because of someone not handling their anger very well. And that's business. You'd think business should be pretty cut and clean. That the accountants should be able to sit down and run numbers and clean that one up. But if that happens in business, how much more friendships? How much more marriages? Parents with their children, especially the adult children. How many adult children never see their parents because somewhere along the line there was a don't you dare leave that house. If you walk out that door, don't you ever come back. And they walked out that door and they never went back. And then someone gets old, someone dies. It's too late. So be careful about picking fights in times of intense emotion. That moment where you most want to, don't. When you're in grief, when you're in any emotion really, take out your feelings with people, not at people. With, not at. Intense emotions are to be expected when you're grieving. Anytime you have intense emotions, whether it's triggered by grief or anything else, take them out with people, not at people. They arise at any time of great stress. The key is that if you allow yourself to be emotionally intense, and I do recommend you give yourself permission to be emotionally intense, but be emotionally intense with people at issues. Give yourself permission to be emotionally intense with people at circumstances. Then you can get sympathy. Then you can get partnership. So imagine for a moment, I'm furious. And you know I'm furious because I just spent 4 years working this thing. And that I was supposed to get paid $300,000 on this 4-year deal. And I'm pissed. I'm not even angry. I'm pissed. And then I find out I'm not going to get paid $300,000. I'm going to get paid $80,000. So I'm pissed. Then I find out I'm not even getting the $80,000. And I just wasted 4 years working it, and I'm not going to get paid a dime. And I'm mad. And I'm talking to you, and ooh, you can tell I'm so mad. I'm mad about those people. I'm mad about this situation. I'm mad about 4 years. If that's the way I'm talking, would you be sympathetic? If that's what I'm going through, could you partner with me for some solutions, some ways through? Yeah. Let's shift a little bit. What if you know that's why I'm angry, but instead of taking it out with you at the issue, instead of taking it out with you about the circumstances, I take it out on you. You know that's why I'm really upset. But you do one thing and I am all over you. I'm calling you names, I'm judging you, I'm jumping on you, I'm telling you how you're worthless because I feel worthless. I tell you how crappy you are because I feel crappy. Because I'm mad at them, but they're not here, I'm going to take it out on you. I might even push you, shove you. I will say vile things to you, about you, to hurt you, worse than I would even ever say to them. Now, are you likely to be sympathetic? Or are you likely to be hurt? Are you likely to partner with me for a solution, or are you likely to have to get your distance? Might it even be possible that in my fury over that, I could permanently destroy this relationship? I mean, suppose it takes me a month to deal with my anger about that. And for that entire month, you are my target. And not only are you my target, I give myself permission to use you as a target. To just emotionally, and possibly in martial arts classes, even physically take out my frustration on you. And I think it's okay for me to hurt you because of what those other people did to me. How many people think, well, that'd be ridiculous. I'm not going to volunteer for that. Why would someone volunteer for that? Why would someone volunteer to be a victim? But you need to find some very unhealthy, codependent person who's willing to be in that learned helplessness situation. You're looking for a mentally ill person is what you're looking for. I don't want to be that person. But if I decide, well, no, this is my strategy. I get mad about that. I take it out on this other person. So what I'm looking for is someone who does learn helplessness. I'm looking for a codependent, learn helplessness person that's willing to be a victim for me. Because I need to be the villain. And I can't be a good villain if I don't have a victim. So you volunteer to be my victim so I can just beat the crap out of you whenever I get upset. Because, I get upset about things. No healthy person will volunteer for that job. And I want to have healthy relationships. Now, if you had a healthy person and they stick with you, but volunteer for that job, they become unhealthy because that's the only way to cope with that position. So when, not if, when you are emotionally intense, because we all will be emotionally intense with people at issues. Be emotionally intense with people about circumstances. Don't take it out on someone that's not the victim or not the villain. We use self-defense to stop the bad guy. We don't use our fighting skill to beat up on our own victims. That's not what we're training for, right? The same thing on an emotional level. The metaphor has a perfect analogy cutting across. If I get beat up by someone or something else, that does not give me the permission to wander down the street, pick the next person to beat up because I'm mad. It certainly doesn't give me permission to go home and beat my wife or my kids, does it? We know this. Well, what if what's beating me up is my grief? If I'm in pain, does that give me the right to inflict pain on the people I'm supposed to love the most? No. Does it give me the right to inflict pain on people who are already in pain over the same thing? No. And in particular, I'm big on this in households. Because if I'm married and I have kids, and I just went through this $400,000 disaster, does that only affect me as an individual, or does that also affect my wife? Did she also just lose $400,000? Yes, she did. She spent 4 years losing her husband to that work for no money. She lost too. The difference is she has even less power over it than I do. How about the kids? Did they lose out too? If we had gotten paid, what would that have given to the kids? They lost the benefit. They lost too. And they are also completely powerless. They suffered the same loss and have nothing they can do about it. And then I'm going to turn around and take it out on them and beat them up even more? That'd be insane! And unfortunately, all too common. If you take out your emotional intensity at people, you can expect to alienate people. You can quite reasonably and rationally expect you will alienate people. Whatever alienation might look like in a given relationship. If in a martial arts class, as a metaphor, if you know when I'm upset, I just throw punches and kicks without thinking about where I'm punching and kicking, then you begin to learn, all right, Scott's upset, you got to stay out of kicking range. If, on the other hand, when I'm really upset, I pick up a sword and I'm whipping that sword around. Well, then you're like, okay, that's a sword. That could kill you. You better stay clear of sword range anytime he's upset because you don't know what he's going to do. He is not paying any attention and he doesn't seem to care. What if I do it with the staff? What if I start throwing things? Then you gotta stay out of the range of however far I can throw stuff. So depending upon what kind of things I do when I'm upset, I might alienate people to the point of say, okay, you know, I see Scott's under stress. Just leave him alone. Go away. Come back in a month. Maybe he'll be better. Maybe not. Can't train with this guy. Can't do business with this guy. Can't be his friend. Can't be in a relationship with him. He's not safe. On the other hand, what if I always direct my anger only in healthy directions? And you can tell I'm angry, but you know I won't hurt you. Now can you be a comfort to me? What if you know I may take out my anger and my hurt and my pain, and you can see that I'm in pain, but I will only beat up a bag. I will only break things that are supposed to be broken, like the rebreakable boards or bricks, or I'm only punching and kicking where I ought to be punching and kicking. Now I'm safe. Now you can come alongside without me hurting you, and be a partner, and be a help, and be a comfort, and help me through this dark time. Because I didn't attack you. I did not attack you. And when you develop that skill, and it's a skill, it's just something you practice until you get really, really good at it, then you can be in tremendous pain. And people know that you won't attack them because of your pain, that you will only attack them if they attack you. And if they know they're not going to attack you, then they know you're safe. The good guys know I'm a safe person to be around martial arts-wise. Hopefully the bad guys know I am not a safe person. Do not attack me. That is not going to go well for you, right? Had a woman look up from a table one time when she's signing us all in, and she's hearing that a whole bunch of us are black. I was like, wow, I feel really safe now. They're saying, hey, terrorists can storm the building, and it's like, I know, okay, send that table after them. Martial arts convention. More masters and black belts in one room at one time. The security guards know I'm just here to give order and give directions, because if something actually happens, the room will take care of it. Nothing I need to do. But they know they're safe. Because they know none of these masters are going to like do anything bad to us. And if something really bad happens, we can just count on them. That's who you want to be. Also in your grief, try to be aware if you might be slipping on responsibilities. Try to be aware. What's your responsibilities? If you find that you are slipping, you have a few options. One of them is you can step up your performance. And this is usually our go-to one. A lot of us think like, oh, yeah, I gotta take care of this. I gotta feed the kids, gotta do the shopping, gotta do the laundry, gotta take care of the house, gotta go to work, gotta this, gotta that. But number two is you can get help. It's okay to get help. It's okay to say, I can't handle all of this right now. Can someone just help me, please? Can someone just take care of the food for me? Give me one less thing I need to do. Do my grocery shopping for me, so I just have to have one less thing to do. Help me clean up. You can reduce or eliminate the responsibility. And a whole bunch of stuff, sometimes we do it because we do it. It doesn't need to be done, it's just something that we do. And it's okay if it doesn't get done this week. It's okay if it doesn't get done this month. It can wait. So it's okay to say, okay, you know, I'm just not going to do that right now. Or I'm not going to do as much of that right now. You might figure, okay, you know, I still need to go to work. And normally I might work 80 hours in a week. But you know what? I think I'm going to cut that down to 40. Because, you know, I got some stuff going on. I'm going to spend some more time with the family. I'm going to spend some more time with the kids. I'm not going to be gone at work all the time. I mean, I could literally go weeks without even seeing my father, because he was routinely up in the morning before I was up, and he didn't get home until after I went to bed. My mother would take me and my brother to his job so we could see our dad. Now, if he's grappling with that responsibility, he might start thinking, you know what? I'm not putting in 100-hour weeks for a couple of weeks. I'm going to do 40-hour weeks. I'm going to see my kids. I'm going to see my wife. We're going to spend some time together. I want my kids to see Dad at home. I don't want my kids to just see dad at work. Now, what options are available to you depends on the responsibility. What options are available to you depends on the resources that you have. Some of these responsibilities might include parenting. And depending upon what's going on, sometimes the grandparents can be a great help, but depending upon where the grief is coming from, sometimes the grandparents are in grief too. But some of those friends, neighbors, other parents, they might be able to help alleviate some of it. Homemaking. Homemaking is an easy one to have alleviated. And if people know you're in pain, when it comes to things like homemaking and helping out with stuff like that, it's amazing how many people are really willing to come alongside and help if you will let them. And just let them. A job, it's harder to find people who will do your jobs for you. Things related to your career, same thing. But with jobs and career stuff, can you get some time off? Can you even just cut back your hours? Maybe can you stop working overtime for a little while? Give yourself some breathing space. Take some vacation time. Take a mental health day. Take a physical health day. Or running your business. Do you really need to be the one doing all of this stuff? Or can you let some of it wait? Now, what are your bare bones kind of keep the wheels turning level that you'd have to do right now? And what can you take a breath from during a time of grief? And take a look at that. Try to be aware if you might be avoiding the pain. You might set it aside for good reasons for a period of time, such as while at work or at a celebration like a wedding or a baby shower. One of the first things I did counseling-wise, even before I talked to the second family member after this last death, is I was talking with a woman who had a struggle. She says, I have been sobbing all morning. And I have a baby shower this afternoon. How can I go to this baby shower and pretend to be happy when I'm going through all of this? All she had to do, and this was my advice to her, is feel the pain right now. Focus on the loss right now. Sit in your room and sob into your pillow. 20, 30, 60 minutes before it's time for the baby shower, clean yourself up, get ready to go, and focus on the baby. Focus on the fact that your friend is about to give birth. Focus on the fact a new life is coming into this world and is bringing joy into a mom and dad's life. And stay focused and zeroed in on that for the entire baby shower. And then when you go home after the baby shower, whatever you feel, you'll feel. And you might feel some combination at the exact same time. You might feel a circle of life thing of one person dies and then another life is on the way. You might just feel the loss again. You might feel the joy. Either one will be okay. It's not a matter of pretending. It's a matter of where is your focus. You're focusing on the baby. And while you're focusing on the baby, focus on the baby. It's not pretending. Don't pretend. Stay zeroed in on what you're celebrating. And she did. And said, I had so much fun at that baby shower. And I went home and I felt pretty good. And then I suddenly started sobbing again. And it was even worse than it was before. Because there's a contrast now. Now the darkness hit her that much harder because of the light. But that was good for her. And she walked it through. She didn't avoid it. She walked it through. She set it aside for a short time because this is what needs to happen now. We are celebrating. It's a baby shower. Just like if it was a bridal shower or a wedding. One of the things I talk about as a pastor sometimes is the whiplash you can get if you have a funeral and a wedding on the same day. But it's really not any different conceptually than if you have two back-to-back counseling sessions, and one counseling session is about something joyful and the other counseling session is about something sorrowful. And that whether you're a counselor or whether you're officiating something, I mean, you got to stay zeroed in on the one you're doing. But be aware, though, if you're genuinely avoiding the pain, you might feel numb for hours at a time, but then you should allow yourself to go through it. And here's a key to remember. If you don't, it might break through at any time by itself. And if so, you might not know how. You might not know when. You might just shut down. A Navy SEAL went through his grief of taking life for the first time. And that's tough. That's one of the hardest things that any military person does, is taking life. That's even harder than watching someone die. Because all of us know people die. But when you're the one that does it, that's different. That's pretty unique to people who have to do that kind of stuff. And he thought it was fine. You know, I did what I was trained to do. I mean, it was him or me. I mean, that's the job. I mean, I know his job is to kill me, my job is to kill him. And, yeah, I did my job better than he did his job. I'm okay with that. Well, intellectually, he's okay with that. He was at his son's birthday party. And because he hadn't really grappled with it, he's walking into the kitchen having picked up some dishes, and all of a sudden they hear the dishes crash to the ground. They go inside. He is on the ground in fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. It broke through all of a sudden in a surprising situation. Now, fortunately, it broke through in a way that it was tears. What if it had broke through in a violent way? Even just violent words. So deal with stuff. Don't go numb. Don't put it off. Deal with it. Walk it through. Be aware if you might be getting stuck. Be aware if you're stuck in denial. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to openly accept all of it all at once. But if you realize, I might not really be dealing with all of this yet, or you're dealing with different bits now than you were before. In martial arts, we'll talk about there should always be something that makes you feel like a white belt, but what makes you feel like a white belt this year should be different than what made you feel like a white belt last year. But there's nothing that makes you feel like a white belt, you're not stretching. If you know that you did denial as one of your coping mechanisms, are you still in denial over all the exact same things, that you never emotionally dealt with them, in which case you're probably stuck in denial. If, however, you're kind of still in denial, but what you're in denial about is different than what it was last week, you might be just slowly processing. That denial filter on your heart might be just letting things through in the size of chunks you can handle. So long as it keeps changing, you're probably okay. You might want to speed it up, but you're probably okay. If you're still in denial, you just don't want to deal with it, and it's always the same thing you don't want to deal with, then you're probably stuck. And you need to get unstuck. You need to walk it through on purpose. You might get stuck in anger, and you can tell that one pretty easily if you're always angry. You might get stuck in bargaining if you're constantly trying to make deals with God. You might get stuck in depression. Now, some people, interestingly enough, get stuck in depression on purpose because they feel guilty for not being depressed. And I've known people who've considered Christmas is ruined forever because their dad died at Christmas time. And you go, okay, well, this Christmas being ruined because dad died at this Christmas, totally get that. Next Christmas being hard because dad died last Christmas, totally get that. 35 years later, and you're mad that your grandkids are enjoying their Christmas because your dad died 35 years ago, probably not nearly as cool anymore. Someone got stuck. And they felt like, well, if I ever give myself permission to enjoy a Christmas, even with my kids, even with my grandkids, I'm being disrespectful to my father. Not at all. What it means is you've learned to live with it. This is the new normal. I'm celebrating Christmas with my kids. I'm celebrating Christmas with my grandkids. Christmas is still Christmas. If you find you're getting stuck, consider if you're doing something to be stuck. Sometimes people will drink and get themselves stuck because they use alcohol to numb themselves so they never have to deal with it and they get stuck. Or they do the same thing with drugs. Drinking and drugs are a common one. And so just stop it. Consider if you might need professional help. You might just need to get back to really living life. Might be that simple. Just get back to really living life. Celebrate a Christmas. Celebrate a Mother's Day. Celebrate a whatever it is. And if you know it's coming, be prepared. Part of what made my ability to deal with my father in 2 weeks go so fast is he had cancer for years. Being prepared didn't mean like, okay, he's dead. On with life. It did mean, okay, I still need a couple of weeks. If it was a shock, if it was an undiagnosed heart condition and we thought everything was great, and then poof, he's suddenly gone and we weren't ready for that. Probably not 2 weeks. Because not prepared. Didn't know it was coming. If you know something's coming, you can decide to be ready for it. Doesn't mean that you won't have grief. It just means that you're prepared to go through it, and you can probably go through it faster. If you know someone is terminal, or someone is at risk in their physical health, or someone's at risk in their mental health, you can be mentally and emotionally prepared to go through grief. To know that there's a process. To pre-grieve chunks of things that you know are going to be different now. When I knew my father was terminal, I can already start dismantling every hope and every dream for a future with him. Because we know he's not going to be around. So instead of all of that disappearing, that could be pre-grieved. But when I had to grieve my divorce, that was a surprise. Every hope and every dream I had included my wife and the kids. And when all that had to be dismantled, it wasn't just I lost the relationship, it's I lost every single vision of the future I had, and all of it had to be dismantled. That took a while. But if you know it's coming, and I was surprised, but if you know it's coming, you can be ready. So you're not surprised. You'll still go through the grief, but you can be ready for it. Couple of things to end with. One is, it's okay to not be okay. That's huge. It's okay to not be okay. When you're going through the grieving process, it's okay to not be okay. How things hit you is very individual to you. Just like when things hit other people, it's very individual to them. And it may not always be based on the depth of the connection to the deceased. And that's surprising to people sometimes. Sometimes we understand, it's like, well, you two were so close, of course, but sometimes it could be someone you weren't close to, and the magnitude of the grief is shocking to you. And it might have something to do with the role. It might have something to do with an analogy in your life. It might seem completely random because you don't know where the connection is. It can be very individual. It's okay to feel however you feel. Which brings us to the other side, and we'll wrap up with this. It's okay to be okay. You might actually be okay. You might be okay in a couple of weeks, and that's okay. People often struggle with whether or not it's okay actually being okay. That they feel guilty for being okay. A majority of people are really pretty resilient. A majority of people are really pretty resilient when it comes to most loss. Doesn't mean they'll always be resilient over every loss, but most people are pretty resilient about most loss. You might be okay. You might be okay due in part to your faith. You might have settled your theology. You might have settled your philosophy. You might have really honestly settled that in your heart. You might have total confidence that this person truly is in God's hands in heaven. And you're okay with that. You're okay with them being out of pain. You're okay with them finally getting to the end of their journey. So you could be okay. whatever the reason you're okay, it is just as okay to be okay as it is okay to not be okay. So depending upon where your grief is and what your grief is about, you might be okay pretty quick. It might take you a while to be okay. But whether you're okay now, or you're okay in 2 weeks, or you're okay in 6 months, or you're okay in 2 years, it's okay to be okay. You don't have to be stuck in forever not okay. You can become okay, and that's okay. So hopefully that helps you go through grieving. And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know there's a complete lack of theology in this, because we're talking about going through pain. And you don't grapple with theology in times of pain. You settle your theology in times of study. You settle your theology in times of contemplation. You don't grapple with these things in times of intense emotion. And still remember to do with yourself the exact same thing you're talking about doing with other people. Be aware that, especially if you listen to the last 2 lessons and you learned a lot, or self-evident to you because you've been around here enough that you go, well, yeah, of course, that's how you do it. Most people don't know that. And if you're the one in grief, just be prepped beforehand. Most people don't have a clue how to deal with people going through grief. And don't expect them to. Because if they don't already know, they're not going to suddenly, instantly, magically know. And while you're in grief, you might not be as gentle as you might prefer to be when you're explaining it to them. Maybe if you like, send them links to the last 2 messages and say, can you go listen to these before you come back? Just so maybe it'll be more helpful. Just saying. Because if I try to talk to you right now, ooh, you're not going to want to hear what I have to say. And I'm going to really wish I hadn't said it. So just be aware when you're going through grief, most people have no clue how to help you through your grief. Hopefully, they will learn. And I'm hoping from this series, not only from this message of you going through your grief, but from the last 2 messages, for other people to learn how to help you go through your grief. And of course, mostly for us to help other people go through theirs. So thank you very much. I hope that this series, while certainly it's not fun, it's certainly not an exciting series, that it is a powerful and hopefully a helpful series. Thank you for seeing it through.